Thanks so much for joining. I've been told I should use the microphone. We're going to record tonight for those people that weren't able to be here to make sure that we get the information out there. We were asked for those that weren't able to attend any of the public meetings, would we be recording? And so we'll record and make sure that's up on our website as well. I'm Josh Johnson, Superintendent, Valley City Public Schools, and believe it or not, this is my 9th year here in Valley City. Time seems like it has flown by. I have one in college and one in 4th grade still now, and so a little bit more gray hair, a little bit less hair on the back of my head. But thanks so much for coming tonight, being here, for coming to learn more about our proposed new school referendum. Tonight we're going to take the opportunity, about 30 minutes, to be able to share information with you. The intent as we've navigated through the last 3 or 4 weeks is to make sure that we're providing information. Factual information, timely, and transparent information. And so we're scheduling 4 public meetings, this being one of 4. We're going to have some question and answer, coffee, donut type of meetings that are going to be at each of the schools, an opportunity just to sit informally and ask questions and get information, all before the vote on June 10th. So before we get started, just a couple of introductions. Facility committee members are here. If you raise your hand, we have school board members that are here tonight. And then sitting behind me, Josh Legine will be speaking, sharing some information on behalf of the School Facility Advisory Committee. Josh works at John Deere. His wife is with Bridge City Dentistry, and they have a couple of kids in our school district. In addition to that, we have Kyle Kabami with ICON, and we have Travis Jordan with ICON. And so we invited them to be here to help present information, as well as to be able to answer questions as they come about as well. So after the presentation's done, there will be a question and answer. Anyone that has questions, we will take some time to answer the questions, myself or ICON. After that is done, we set aside some tour guides to give tours around the school, thinking that about 30 to 45 minutes would be set aside to be able to tour the schools. And so we hope that you have time to be able to sit through presentation, Q&A, and then time to be able to tour around the schools after that is done. We are willing to stay here however long it takes to be able to answer your questions and make sure that you leave with information. I think that the important thing, and something that we've again reiterated, is that our intent tonight is not to persuade you. It's not to lead you into a yes vote. It's to make sure that all of you have the information that you need to be able to make an informed vote, whether you vote absentee before June 10th or whether you show up in person on June 10th. When the Highlander Activity Center was voted on in 2003, I think there was about 2,300 total voters that voted in that referendum, and we're hoping to be able to exceed that. And we'll get in talking a little bit more about the process of getting to the point where we're at right now. So without further ado, we'll jump in. How did we get here? So 2018, we hired a company, construction management firm, to come in. They were experts in the field. What they do is go around, and as part of their organizations, they'll go inside and out into schools and tell you what the issues are and provide cost estimates. And so we initiated, the school board hired a company called Consolidated Construction Company in 2018. They provided us our first facility assessment. So every single one of our school facilities, they gave us a very detailed list of what works, what doesn't work, what we would need to address, and in the time period we would need to address that. And so that information is out available on our webpage as well. As you guys may know, in 2021, in amongst COVID and the pandemic, we received some federal dollars, and we were trying to decide what we were going to do with school facilities at the time, and so we asked the question, is this a time to repair schools, or is this a time to look at replacing schools? And so that fall, we started hosting several public meetings. We held those public meetings in the theater. A short while after hosting those public meetings, we sent out a community survey, and we had a great response from the community, asking questions about whether or not we should have a referendum, whether or not we should look at a replacement of a school, what version of a school we should replace. And so the board took that information in amongst a really volatile time when we were looking at what the best option would be for the school district. So based on the response of the surveys, our public was looking for more information. And so the board hit pause, stepped back, did a little bit more research, and at the conclusion of the year, decided not to proceed forward, but spend the next year looking at what renovation or repairs of our schools would look like. So in and amongst those two years, there was quite a bit of study and digging into our school facilities, decide what the best option was for the school district going forward, and receiving a lot of feedback from our community. Last spring, we jumped off and the board had conversation again about, what is the next best option for us as a school district to repair or replace. And so the charge that they stepped off with is to form a facility advisory committee. And so in that process, we assembled a group in late fall, and that group started meeting. They met 5 times between December and March. They were tasked with taking tours of the schools, looking at various options from repair to a new school. Ultimately, their responsibility from the board was to bring back a recommendation. And so in March, they came forth with a recommendation to the board, and we have Josh Levine, who I'm going to turn it over to here in a second, to talk through about what their priorities were and what their recommendation was as a committee. And so just to note that this was the second committee that the school district had formed, made up of staff members and parents, community members, seniors, trying to get a good representation of our community and determining what the next step forward was. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh Levine and let him talk a little bit about the process of the Facility Advisory Committee and their recommendation.
Thanks, Josh. As he said, I'm Josh Levine, so I work at John Deere. I got 3 kids, 2 in the school district, and one's 4-year-old, so she'll be there soon. But, you have the clicker, Josh. Just want to thank the school board and school for having me tonight. On behalf of our 17-member school advisory committee, I'm going to talk through kind of our priorities and some of our what we discussed. So we've met 5 different times. Most meetings, thanks to Josh, lasted 3 to 4 hours, so a lot of time running in the district offices, but nonetheless, I think all of us enjoyed our time and super thankful to get to experience the school. So I'm not from Valley City originally, so I never went to school here, so for me to be able to tour the schools and look at what we have here was a great experience for me. So really, our advisory committee met, we toured the schools, we looked at a bunch of different options, but really we boiled down to kind of what we wanted into 5 top priorities. And so those 5 priorities are consolidating school buildings. So today we have Washington, Jefferson, the district office, and then where we're at today at the high school building is looking at how do we consolidate that into as few buildings as possible. So just from an operational efficiency, but also not being spread across the town, is trying to get us under one roof. We looked at a phased approach. So understanding what our debt limit was, understanding like from a taxpayer perspective, like how could we do this to potentially look at the future of having a K-12 school. And we really felt that by doing a phased approach that might be a better solution than to try doing all at one time. So then maybe I'll skip a bullet here, but just looking at the feasibility of Jefferson, adding on to Jefferson. So you might ask, why did we pick Jefferson? Well, when we toured the schools, we looked at everything and talked to Jordan and the facilities team, we felt that Jefferson was in the best shape. So it requires the least amount of operational expenses, and across all of our buildings was really in the best shape. So when we looked at what space is available to us around it, and all the green space, along with the fact that it was in good shape, we felt that that was something that we really wanted to use as a priority. And then the last two are around safety and security. So today, for those that have students in the district, we don't really have secure entrances, right? We don't have like your typical school where you go through a secure entrance. So that was something that was really a big priority for us. And then the last was just to improve the overall accessibility and adequacy of our educational spaces. So just looking at ADA compliance and some of those were something that was one of our top priorities. So then, as a 17 board member, all of the things I'll talk about, we decided to unanimously present to the school board. So the first is to hold a referendum on June 10th. Within that referendum is to construct a new 3-12 school that'd be attached to Jefferson. And then also not to allocate any funds to the district office or to any outdoor recreational spaces. So with that being is where the school is proposed to be built, and you can see in some of the illustrations, we're taking space that today is used for outdoor recreation. So understanding that if we're going to utilize that space, we're going to have to do some of that stuff elsewhere, and we'll look at partnerships to accomplish that. So part of us to make sure we can kind of keep the total cost a little lower was not to allocate any funds that we vote on the 10th to those particular items. All right, well, that's the end of my slide, so I think turn it over to Kyle, and he'll talk a little bit about what's in the 46 million document.
Thank you, Josh. And Josh, appreciate that. So my name is Kyle Capone with Icon Architectural Group. We were, fortunate enough to start working with the district almost a year ago now, and appreciate all the information and process that they've had to date. And what's great is that we went through this process with the committee, and what's interesting is that we probably had maybe 10, 15 different options that we went through, and at the end of the day, I think we had tweaks every single meeting that we met, and the $46 million option you see now really didn't come to fruition until that very last meeting, where all the different pieces and all the different considerations just started to click. So I'll just briefly kind of go through that. So what's in the $46 million plan? So we're building a 3-12 school right connected to Jefferson here. And what's really powerful about that is that, as Josh had mentioned, Jefferson's surprisingly easy to maintain. It's surprisingly the lowest amount of maintenance that's required to keep that place open and operational. But what's great is that you also have this great land, all the access to the athletic facilities right there that you can attach, and then you created all these new synergies, and that was one of the things that was kind of uncovered in our last meeting, was that by connecting, we're kind of jump-starting the goal of that phased K-12 solution by utilizing Jefferson and getting some great efficiencies right off the bat. And by including that, and see, one thing just we'll point out right here, you can see that we've got printouts, is that this right here is the second level. So we aren't proposing that we're building on top of Charlie Brown. We're just showing that, again, that's the second level that would be right above the plan to the right, or to the left there. The other piece that we would be doing is we'd be addressing safety and security at Jefferson, understanding that there's still elementary school classrooms that would be going on there, and making sure that basically through this plan, all of your students throughout the district would all have a secure entrance, and we'd be again jump-starting that K-12 phased project right away. And then the district offices and Washington would all be properties that would be sold. So, the first priority of the committee was to reduce the number of buildings that the district would run and operate. And so I think we were all hoping for one, and I think to get two was always a stretch goal where we could release that space. It wouldn't be, a district obligation anymore to maintain, to operate, to staff, just huge amounts of efficiency that Josh will touch on in a little bit. And those are here, and again, if folks have questions when we get to Q&A, and even after Q&A, we'll be happy to sit and answer some. And so what else is also included, we have this printed out. So you can see, here's the phasing here, and I think, it's something to be proud of, right, is the 21 different levels, and then the 18 different roof lines that you guys have right now. So, I mean, I've been doing this for a little over a decade, and I can't say that I've been in more levels in one building. The interesting thing is, we're here in this room, but if we were in the HAC, that's a beautiful space. It's a well-maintained space. And I think folks maybe don't see this side of the school. And I really encourage, if you came in through one of these stairs, is to maybe exit through a different door and see if you can find your way up. It's a little bit of a maze, right? But for us, that's really concerning. So we have that laid out for us. And what's really amazing then is if we take some of this space offline, I've had the fortune of coming to town in the winter and seeing where kids park, and then right now as well. But in the winter, it seemed like it's especially difficult for the folks that own homes around the school, and everybody's parked everywhere, and the students are all on the street, and anytime there's an event, it's packed. So by taking this space offline, not only are we reducing the amount of square footage that the school's using and operating and having to maintain, but we're also creating some great parking for the Hackney for downtown, and really, really proud of that. And so there would be a little bit of renovation, and what's really neat is that we are trying to be as smart as possible with this space so that we can utilize some of this space efficiently and not have to build more than we need to. But at the same point, we're only going to renovate what we have to attach it into the mechanical systems below. So you'll have a really good kind of balance of, we're trying to get rid of as much of the overhead space or space that requires a great deal of maintenance to keep up, or maybe it's not accessible, or maybe it's got mechanical systems that have reached their end of useful life, maybe decades ago even, and replacing that with space that would be used by the community. And then again, there is a great balance of finding that spot there. As Josh had mentioned, there is no district office. We cut that from the budget. So it's kind of an interesting thing where we're going to work through that together through design and try to see if we can find creative spaces, certainly not in here, right, but creative spaces where maybe that might make sense. And also understanding that on the prior plan, we have some great efficiencies that we will pick up by connecting the schools. So understanding, I don't know if you've been in Jefferson and seen, when they have recess and they have it indoors in this spot, that's also the spot where they serve lunch, right? And that's also the spot where they have different assemblies and different things. So taking that space and understanding that they would now have access, when desired, right, and controlled access to different spaces throughout the school, now frees up more spaces so that there's things like title and special education and things that were not even part of the program when that school was designed, let alone when this school was designed, that you'll now open up spaces for without building anything new. It's just by connecting them, we're creating so many efficiencies. So really, really proud of this work, and really the committee led us down that path, and it was really neat to go through and see, from the first meeting of let's consider these options and how much they changed, and we could have only gotten to this path, had we had the iterations before. So it was many hours of work to that committee, and we appreciate that. So why new school?
I would encourage you afterwards with the boards that are over there as well to be able to take a look at what the change would be, what would be part of the new school, but also what would be part of the Highlander Activity Center and how that could be used for both school and community purposes. I would say of all the questions that we've had, that's probably one of the biggest questions is what would you do with the existing space with the Highlander Activity Center, and which portions of the 70s and which portions of 1991 would you be keeping? And so we're happy to speak more to that after the presentation as well. So we talked about the 4 years or so that we've been looking at facilities and studying and trying to come up with the best plan to put forward to our community to have a voice and make that decision. And so it all kind of centered around why a new school. So why not repair what we have existing, and why a new school? And so it really came down to three things: our aging systems and infrastructure, modernization of our educational spaces, and then cost savings and efficiencies. And so we want to talk a little bit about each of those, highlighting why we're proposing to build a new school. So first, and we put this information out as well, the estimated cost to replace and repair our current systems and infrastructure is estimated at $37 million. Now, in 2018, when we had our facility condition assessment provided for us, that number was about $12 million. When we updated that in 2021, when we first started doing this work and we presented this to our community, it was $26.7 million. So in that short amount of time, in amongst COVID, with the cost of construction and inflation doing what it had done in that time frame, as we know, milk and bread and gasoline and everything else had doubled and skyrocketed. So At that point, we believed that all the repairs would be 26.7. We updated that in January of 23 and came up with a $37 million number. My wife asked a really good question. She said, wonder if it's not 37 million. It's just based on an estimate, right? And I said, absolutely it is. And it's based on a company that came in and gave us on comparisons of what they've done in other schools around. And so if it's not $37 million, wonder if it's only $30 million or $25 million? The same question is asked is 25 million to 37 million from a system standpoint with systems that have exceeded their life and need to be replaced. So part of this plan on the basis of 37 million is between the high school, between Washington and Jefferson Elementary, the 37 million. But if you take Jefferson off of that, by demolishing the portions of the high school and by closing and selling Washington Elementary, we would eliminate 30 million of that $37 million. That's again the estimate that we came up with on the basis of the facility condition assessment that was conducted. So when we look at the cost to repair a building versus the cost to replace a building, we're estimating at least 65% of the cost to repair compared to what the cost of a new school would be. So the federal threshold is 50%. The state threshold, when looking at replacing state buildings or universities, is 60%. So we're at 65%. So that again was part of the information that the facility committee had considered and looked at. So people have asked, well, what's part of the systems and the infrastructure? And one question we've had is, you know, have you not been maintaining our buildings? I think it's an insult to our facility directors to assume, or to past boards over 25, 30 years, that we have not been maintaining. I think, in fact, if you walk around, I think you'd agree that the buildings have been pretty well taken care of. It's the systems and the infrastructure beyond that, when you lift up the ceiling tiles or you get into the HVAC systems or the plumbing, the piping behind the walls, that we run into the majority of our issues. And so building repairs are things such as roofs and doors, windows, that just again have aged over time and need to be replaced. HVAC systems that likewise have aged and have broken down and would need to be either have major repairs or complete replacements. Plumbing, we've had several floods. Sarah Lieber, I think, is up in the corner, and I think she's keeping track of the total number of floods that she's had in her library, but we've had several. 4 floods. We've removed books from the library, I think, at least on 2 occasions. And so then electrical, just lighting, outlets, technology changes. So that encompasses the majority. Again, when we start talking about the systems and infrastructure, I want to make a note, and it's been highlighted as well, is there's nothing wrong with our foundation. That is a true statement. If you see that put out there, there is nothing wrong with our foundation. There is not. We have an excellent foundation. 1919 building was built exceptionally well. There's not other schools out there, Oaks being an example of that, where I think their 3rd floor is about ready to fall off and tip over into their parking lot. That's not the case for us. There's not, I don't know, I can't say $0, but there's minimal dollars of 37 million that would be part of any infrastructure. So breaking that down, the high school, we went on a little bit of a history tour with Wes Anderson at the museum to try to gather some of this information, but the original building we're in right here is 1919, and we have some posters up if you take a tour that kind of highlight the different ages of our buildings. But 1919, 1948, 1958. What do you think happened between 1919 and 1948? A couple things: World War I, World War II, Depression. There were some things happening in the world at that time. 1948, 1958, 1971 were kind of the baby booms that were happening, and so Valley City School District were definitely on a boom population enrollment-wise, and so 1971 came along. I see one person here I know for sure that was in Ritchie 1 or Ritchie 2. Any volunteers? Did anyone go to Ritchie 1 or Ritchie 2? A couple up here. And so Ritchie 1, Ritchie 2 were taken down, replaced with 1971, the junior high edition. I think Ritchie 1 or Ritchie 2, one of them was 1966, the other one was 1971, when they were replaced. And there's an article out there that said modern education is necessary to replace Ritchie 1 and Ritchie 2. So in the 60s, those were conversations that they were having then, what modern education looked like. 1919. Washington Elementary, built in 1956, addition in 1984, about 35,000 square feet. Challenges that we run into at Washington, windows, roofing, doors, asbestos wall tiles, heating and ventilation. Note that AC is not an issue at Washington Elementary. Use some of those COVID funds that we talked about $500,000 of our COVID dollars. We put mini split units at Jefferson Washington Elementary. The board chose not to do that here at the high school because it would have been over $1 million and we would have had mini splits hanging out windows on the second and third floors. Other issues, plumbing. Plumbing is a significant issue. We've had some deterioration of the floor below some classrooms as well. Bathroom sprinklers, some electrical lighting technology. Safety security that was brought up earlier. So about $6.5 million. So between the high school portions of 1919, 48, 58, and portions of 70, 71, as well as Washington Elementary, would be about $30 million that we would eliminate in maintenance if the referendum passed. There's Washington Elementary. And then Jefferson Elementary School was our newest school, built in 1964, addition in 2009. Currently houses grades K through 3, and building repairs are windows and doors, heating, not air conditioning, ventilation, piping, bathroom sprinklers, lighting technology, safety security, about $5.5 million estimated at Jefferson Elementary. That's a great picture. Kind of preceding the development. Pretty cool. It's really fun when you can tune in. You can see the age of the vehicles from the 60s as well, pulling up to the doors. So I'm going to turn it over to Kyle to talk a little bit about modern educational spaces. And one thing I want to note about ICON, what makes ICON unique, the last time you were here and we talked to you about what to do with our school facilities, we were using a different architectural firm. We decided to go with ICON after learning a little bit more about them and the projects that they've done across the state of North Dakota. For one, I'll note that ICON has not been paid a dime by Valley City Public Schools since we began working with them almost a year ago, and won't until a referendum would pass or we would decide to part ways and go different directions and not pay them at all. And so, again, that's a commitment that they've made. And so I just want Kyle to talk a little bit about when they're designing schools, what that includes, and what does a modern educational space look like.
Thanks, Josh. We would accept being paid eventually. Yeah. So we do that on purpose, just seriously though. We're working in maybe 15 different districts right now across the state, and all of them, it isn't a Valley City special. This is the deal that we do. We don't get paid, we earn our pay when you guys trust what we've worked on together. And that's why we always ask that we work through a facilities committee. They already had that set up, and then we always ask that as we're going through these priorities and these decisions, that you allow us to have input on ways that we can be efficient, ways that we can make sure that we're using effective dollars, and then we're taking every penny that we can and we're using it for student-centered spaces. And while we might not have the fanciest buildings around, we'd like to think that they're very well liked by the students, easy to maintain, easy to build. So here's a couple of brand new elementary schools that we worked on in Mandan and Bismarck. And again, you can see lots of heavy-duty materials, precast, brick, not giant over-the-top, glass parapets or anything like that. But what we do have is great secure entries. And then what's amazing is that I think if you're not going to offend us, if you looked at these pictures, you'd be like, well, that's not the nicest school I've ever seen. We're okay with that. That's kind of on purpose. Because as you walk in and you see this cafeteria common space, we really want people to be wowed by the spaces where students spend their time. Not just the front door, not just the curb appeal. We want the student spaces to be amazing, to feel like we're bringing energy and activity to the different classrooms. That's really where we choose to spend our dollars. So if you see both of these entries, you'll see there's some common themes where our front office is right off of the entryway, and that's on purpose, right? We want some visibility as folks are walking up to the school. We want them to come through a secure entry. Security is really the biggest issue that we're seeing across the state, and that's something that we can address. and the other piece being ADA accessibility. Again, if you were able to make it down these stairs, those are very special stairs. I'd say, I don't know if they're like lawsuit quality stairs or something, but they'll keep you on your toes, literally, right? So we prefer not to build stairs like that, right? And we want to have accessible spaces. And another thing to just touch on with accessibility is that's not a choice, right? So there was an opportunity where a community member went to a school district and wanted a space to be accessible. They said no, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court in North Dakota, and the school district had to do it. So ADA accessibility is not an option. I think right now you guys are surviving by the grace of your community and by, I would say, amazing students and staff members that are dealing with all the different things. But one of the things that I touch on here, and we'll walk over here really quick because we're talking about ADA. So if we were trying to get from here down to the hack, the most accessible path would be to go up that elevator and go outside. That's the most accessible path to go through. We actually modeled, and we were creating like 400 feet of ramping. It was kind of crazy. It would have been another interior record to go along with the levels. So ADA accessibility is something that just really needs to be addressed. And so we would handle that through just the current needs and design scopes. And I think that regardless, the new school that we're proposing would be 2 levels. I do think that we would have to compromise with the gym and the entryway. So we'd probably have 4 roof lines and 2 levels. I was told that was acceptable by committee members. And then the next piece, looking at modern classrooms, and we'd say, 21st century learning is all about creating flexible spaces and understanding that students learn differently, and that you can see here, folks aren't, it's not 4 rows of 7, all facing the same direction, right? It's working in small groups, it's working with technology, it's making sure that there's spaces where students and staff can collaborate and work together outside of the classroom. It's very common and almost a requirement now that as we're designing classroom spaces, we're designing breakout spaces with those corresponding areas, because those spaces will be used somehow. And I'm sure folks that have maybe been in this school during the school year and walked down the hallways, I wager that you've probably seen a kid or 2 sitting in the hallway. And that's because they need a place to go that's not the classroom. Sometimes they're working together, sometimes they're working independently, sometimes it's a library if it's not flooded, right? So we need a space to have students be able to work together. And what's amazing is we call it in-between spaces, and it's normally, it's the corners of rooms, but let's activate it with just a little bit of furniture to make sure that it's a space that can be utilized by students and staff, really. So looking at that, and making sure that we're creating a space that accepts technology, that's flexible, understanding that students learn differently. There's different kinds of seating, different kinds of groupings. There's different requirements that students have. There's so many things that are happening in schools now that weren't even, on our radar in 1919, or let alone even in the 60s and 70s. So looking at these spaces, and we have more that we can show you after the presentation. We'd be happy to show you, our whole portfolio, but you can see the different projects that we've worked on, from classroom additions in Emerado all the way to the new high school in Mandan. For us, it's all about making smart decisions, using dollars where the students and staff will feel them the most. And maybe, if you went down, a hallway and a back corridor in the Mandan High School that we're very proud of, it just has plain block in a back stairwell, because that's all that's needed, right? Let's take that money and let's use it for student space. And we're really, really proud of that. So while some folks will show you the nice, pretty pictures, we're actually more proud of the ugly pictures and the really nice classrooms. So hopefully we answered that question, but if not, we can always go through that again.
So Kyle said, let's try to keep it at about a half an hour. How are we doing so far? We about halfway through the slides, so I'm not the only one that talks too much. So the third behind why now is cost savings and operational efficiencies. And so as we go through and try to estimate what our annual savings would be by consolidating from 3 schools plus the district office to 1 school, we're estimating $750,000. Where do we come up with that? Between staffing, educational program, maintenance, energy, and utility costs. Just give you one example, right now we're operating 3 separate kitchens, cafeterias. And so if we went to 1 school, as Kyle pointed out, we would go from 3 kitchens, cafeterias, cooks, staffs, freezers, equipment, to one cafeteria. K-12, all students served in the same area. And so we've talked about other programs as well, crossing over from special education to physical education, title programs, and so there are efficiencies to be gained by consolidating and going under one roof. The size of school district we're in, unfortunately right now, where we're at is an extremely inefficient model. When we compare and look at ourselves comparable to a Northern Cass or a Central Cass, they're all connected under one roof, and that's what a lot of schools, Grafton Public Schools is doing something similar project as well. So the other thing is right-sizing our educational spaces. And so right now, when we look at those three buildings, we'd be looking at taking 35,000 square feet out of Washington Elementary offline. We'd be looking at taking several thousand square feet off of the Valley State High School building, and so reducing 60,000 total square feet. What was really fascinating in talking to Wes about our enrollment and the history, so in this building, 1972, I believe, would have been the largest class that we ever had. 162 students were in that class. We now have classes of 80. Our elementary classes are 50 or 60. And so when we looked at a replacement versus a renovation of our existing infrastructure, square feet, there were significant cost savings and efficiencies to be gained with that. We didn't have to design a school, have Icon design a school that matched square feet of what we currently have. And so that's where we're estimating the $750,000 annually of cost savings that we would be able to incur, but also being able to right-size our educational spaces. There are some operational efficiencies as well, and we talked a little bit about educational programming, shared spaces of library services, the unique kind of support services, whether it be counseling services or administrative services, having our school nurse in one building with all students instead of going between three buildings, our school resource officer, and so those are some of the other efficiencies. In addition, transportation, food service, gave an example of them activities. So we want to really emphasize, again, part of the facilities recommendation, committee's recommendation with this is to be able to leverage and take advantage of an opportunity to be able to right-size our school to match where we're at from an enrollment standpoint, looking forward, allowing enough space as well for opportunities for growth, but to make sure that if we are going to repair the current existing facilities that we have, where we wouldn't pick and choose which parts of the school we'd be repairing, HVAC systems, windows, and doors, so the cost would be incurred across this large expanse that we have in our current infrastructure. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Kyle and let him talk a little bit about how this plan will be funded.
I'll quickly touch on it. Thank you, Josh. So what's really amazing is, and big whoop to Courtney at the district office, the website that you guys have going on, so Highlanders.org, I don't know if you guys have gone to it recently, but you should. If you go right at the very top right, there's the referendum, big button, and there's so many pieces of information. Your assessment's there, the tax impact calculator is there, and what's great is that calculator is used with the formula provided by the bonding council, not by Icon, not by the school district. So it's the independent companies that all they do is bonding for schools, right? So they provide this information, so we know it's accurate, and you can go in and you type in your true and full value for your property. It's really hard to do that just kind of off the cuff. The easiest way is just to go to the county's website. The bottom right, I just went through the exercise again today to double check it. You go to Barnes County, you scroll down, you can see it says property tax search, you type that in, type in your name or the property tax or the parcel number, and it'll give you your true and full. And we say true and full because it's not your retail, it should be close to your retail of what you can sell your house for or your property for, but your true and full according to your county tax statement. And so if you have multiple parcels of land, you get multiple statements, you would type those in there, and then it would have your proposed cost here. So this is per $100,000 of value. So if it's residential, it's $336 per year. If it's commercial or ag space, it's $373. So that's per century code. That's not because Josh just wants to charge landowners more. That's just the way the century code works. So it's commercial and ag and residential. So you can go, there should be no guessing, there should be no, I don't know what it is, or it's gonna cost me an amount that I can't figure out. Hopefully you're able to go through this, and if not, Jackie has actually volunteered, the business manager here with the district, so you can give her a call or send her an email, and she'll walk through that process with you to go through that process. So if you go to this and if you're reading the ballot language and you type it in and you're like, oh, this is going to cost me, let's say I have a home, it's worth $150,000, and this is going to cost me, 10 grand a year, I'd say you might have switched numbers. So it's always good to check and go through this, but per 100,000, these are your values. Actually, yeah, let's stay right here. So one other thing to touch on too is that there is legislation going on right now at the state on property tax relief. There's been a little bit of back and forth between the House and the Senate. I think we're all in firm belief that something's going to happen. We previously have showed maybe how different bills would impact, but I think right now there's still a little bit of work that's happening in committee. But just know that once we have some more solid information on what's coming from the state, this will be updated so that you can do the calculator. The calculator will still be there, but there'll be some additional information. But I think that everyone at the state has made it very clear that property tax relief is a huge, hot button issue that will be addressed.
So those numbers would change after Siney died in the legislature?
So these numbers,
after the governor signs it?
So these numbers. So the question was, will these numbers
change? Okay.
So these numbers wouldn't change, but then there would be a potential impact from the state that would then change maybe what you would see as your net difference. Good question.
I would say from the committee and the school board standpoint, I don't want to stand here and try to paint a rainbows and unicorns and say that our taxpayers are not going to be impacted by the ask. And so it's a significant ask and looking at replacement versus a repair of the school. And so recognizing the impact on 100,000, the ag impact per acre of land is $3.60 per acre of land to break that down further. But really encourage you again, if you have questions relative to the tax impact and how that impacts you individually, if you're not figuring out through the calculator or through the webpage, stop by, come into our district office. We're happy to walk through that, look at your tax statement as well. And then as Kyle said, to be able to educate and not to force or push property tax relief on anybody, but just to educate that if property tax relief passes, if the referendum would pass, this is what the impact would be to our taxpayers. So a couple things, and again, the intent of this slide is to provide information as we've been doing, factual information. So these are considerations that if the referendum would not pass on June 10th, these would be considerations that the school board would have to entertain. We talked earlier about closing, selling Washington Elementary School. So part of our challenge right now when we lose students, we also lose state funding. And so we've been challenged financially in the last couple of years because of our operational general fund budgets, our footprint, staffing. And so we've had to make changes with our staffing, with our programs. And so part of the consideration in order to be able to balance our budget, if we're not going to save $750,000 each year, we would have to make some changes financially. And so part of that would be closing, selling Washington Elementary School, closing, selling the district office. As Kyle said, we don't have an answer right now where the district office is going. So if you got any space in your garage or something that you're willing to host us for a little while, let us know. But we've talked about pre-kindergarten programs, and part of the reason why we're inquiring about pre-kindergarten programs right now is we believe that we have several students, parents, families that are taking advantage in the surrounding area of free 4-year-old preschool programs. And so part of the reason, again, looking at this is to make sure they're not losing kids to other school districts, Highliners, kids that are living in Valley City. And so that's part of the consideration. If we were able to combine and have one school connected, the idea is that we'd be able to have pre-K at Jefferson in the existing space and then be able to have 3rd grade going to the new portion of the building. Looking at cutting additional programs and staff, continuing to defer maintenance needs, and then looking at what a possible new referendum vote would be. So considerations for the future, just questions as we wrap up and leave you with things to think about going forward, providing again more information. Would a new school help attract and retain young families? I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that build it and they will come. We put that information in the same format of asking a question. Is it true? Will it occur? Does a new school enhance the appeal of the community? We've seen other buildings that have come along, the Highlander Activity Center, the Fine Arts Building, the Wellness Center. I think that have been great additions to our community. Does a new school help businesses grow? Does a new school increase school and community population? What's really interesting and fascinating, kind of doing some of the research on our community, our county, since 1920, Barnes County, as a county, every decade has been on the decline. Since 1920. Valley City as a community has been on the decline every decade since 1970. So we're one of 2 counties in the state of North Dakota, 52 counties, that has had a declining population. I think the question that needs to be asked is, what are you going to do to reverse that? If not, then what does the future hold? Are we going to continue to lose people? Are we going to continue to lose students? What do we want to look like as a school, but also as a community in 10, 20, and 50 years? There's a rich history of school construction and school facilities in Valley City. That's information that we're gonna share out. I think we presented and shared some of that information back in the fall of 2021. In fact, on this very block, down where the Highlander Activity, some of the first modern schools were constructed in 1882. Additions made in the late 1800s. And then we talk about Ritchie 1 and Ritchie 2 ultimately getting replaced by the junior high that was added on. And so there's a rich history. Again, we've gone through several schools. And so, again, it's a question now, is this time? And so providing this information again for you guys to make sure you're informed, you have the information and opportunity to be able to ask questions as well. All right, Kyle?
Just last thing we'll touch on before we open it up for we've got 2 hours scheduled for Q&A, just so you guys know. It's just, we have lots and lots of events, so we're here, right? But the goal is to just have everyone informed. I think we welcome no votes, yes votes, as long as they're informed votes. So our goal is just maximum communication, maximum transparency. All the different things that we've talked about are on the amazing website, highlanders.org, that you can go to, click that referendum button. But we've got meetings in Washington, Jefferson. We've got coffee, I would say donuts and coffee meetings that will also be available to join via Zoom or online. So if you can't make it in person, but you still want to ask some questions, we have those, and then we have some more public meetings as well. And you can see that we've got them kind of dotted at the different schools periodically over the next few weeks leading up to June 10th. And our final meeting will be June 3rd, right here again. So if you guys want just a repeat, that's when that'll be.
All right, so just wrapping up before we turn over back to you guys with an opportunity to be able to ask some questions. I don't think there's a more democratic process than asking our people to voice their opinions and have a say in the future of our school district. And so we know that it's been a little bit debated in our own community on whether or not a project should be voted on or shouldn't be voted on. And so a commitment that the facility committee had made and the school board has made as well is it's time to put this to the community and ask the community what they want to do. In fact, that was a pretty strong sentiment. If it wouldn't have been for inflation, the cost of construction, I think we probably would have asked this question back in the fall of 2021, but the time wasn't right. So the school board stepped back, they went back, they looked at the cost of a renovation, they dug back down, they had an initial committee in 2023 that said, hey, try to pursue some state dollars and see what the state can do to offset. That had a dead end. And so then they formed the advisory committee and came back to the same outcome that we had reached in 2023. And so the opportunity is for our community to have the voice and have the say of what the future is of our school and ultimately what the future is of our community. And so again, from our standpoint, myself, our facility committee, our staff members, our board members, is not to try to twist anyone's arm. It's not to sit here and hold you hostage and pump you with information, trying to convince you of what you should do. And so the intent of this, again, is to try to provide as much information to help you make that decision going forward. I think this is a great turnout tonight. We're trying to be very open, very transparent, address questions. So ask questions, ask any question, ask the tough questions. Try to stump us on questions. If that happens, we'll come back, we'll find the information and come back to you. We're scheduling a lot of public meetings. We're having Q&A sessions. We're recording this, we're putting it on the website. The intent of all that is to be an open book and share that with all of you. Again, with the intent to give you the opportunity to have that information to be able to come and cast your vote. So, with that, I think we'll stand for questions. After we're done with questions, Kyle did tell me that the record for the most questions, or the longest questions, was Killdeer, and I think that was, did you say the total meeting was 4 hours in length? I don't know that anyone wants to be here for another 3 hours, per se. We're also hoping that there will be some of you that will be interested in also taking a tour. Maybe you graduated from here, maybe you haven't been in the school or in parts of the school other than the Highlander Activity Center or the cafeteria in some years, and you'll want to go into some classrooms and see the classrooms, and if you're brave, maybe also get behind the elevator in kind of the oldest portion of the 1919 as well. And so that will happen. Jordan Heck is going to provide some tours. Travis Peterson, our high school principal, is going to provide, he'll be a tour guide. Travis graduated from Valley City High School. Jordan did as well. So hopefully they don't tell you too many stories about the bad things that they did, even back then. And then we have some others as well as the ED. So we want to try to have some small groups. So with that, we'll pause, and if you have questions, we'd like to try to address them. You kind of need to get the icebreaker going, so yes, sir.
I'll just repeat the question. So the question was, Jefferson had $5.5 million roughly, of maintenance required. How's that going to be handled by the district?
Yeah, so again, building repairs, the HVAC system, the piping, the electrical. What we'd look to do with the $46 million is address the safety and security. We've already addressed the air conditioning. Jefferson is the most efficient building. It's the newest of the original buildings in our school district. The heating system runs on electric, so from that standpoint, it's the most reliable for us as well. If I had to speak on behalf of the district, I would say that you wouldn't put much into Jefferson Elementary, and that down the road, you would look at replacing Jefferson Elementary 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And so that's an example of deferred maintenance, where we continue to put dollars in, maintaining the operation, the safety components of the health and safety, but we probably not look at changing all the piping. We wouldn't change probably all the heating systems. I don't know that, unless there are significant leaks, I don't know if we change those others as well. And so I think that's a decision that school board leaders are going to need to make over the next 20 years. And ultimately, probably the community decide, maybe that's a great school, and maybe 10, 20, maybe after, if this vote passes, maybe the referendum would be just simply to do some modifications on that and address that $5.5 million. I would say the one issue, and it may be the elephant in the room, people are thinking this as well, for anyone that went to school at Jefferson Elementary, you've probably sworn at some architects in your time frame. They're designed as pie shapes, they're a pod system. They are not the best classroom setting, and so that's one of the other issues that doesn't show up as part of the $5.5 million. That will need to be considered as part of the district.
Would the hack still be used as the athletic, for all the athletics?
Great question. So the question is, would the Highlander Activity Center still be used for the athletic purposes? And yes, and so part of the cost savings of the $46 million would be to not make the new school, the gymnasium. The gymnasium, so right here, would be physical education. There would be 2 courts. So the intent would be Jefferson Elementary would not have to have Phi Ed amongst peas and carrots, that we would be able to have them over into the new school as well. And so the primary purpose of that gym would be physical education, but there would likely be some sub-varsity events as well. And so that would keep the Highliner Activity Center as volleyball in the fall, wrestling, basketball in the winter, and used for not only school purposes, but for community purposes as well. The intent of the Highliner Activity Center would be to keep the cafeteria. You have a great kitchen there, a functioning kitchen. That is only 1991. And then also keep the South Gym, and then the wrestling room as well. Wrestling is really growing in our school district, and so we would have needs in that South Gym area, and so that would be the intent of the Highliner Activity Center. Would be to really continue to turn into more than just school, but a community event center as well. We talked about being able to host conferences and convention type of things, and maybe family reunions and places for people to be able to rent out that center. And then to have a really nice parking lot that with great access into that center as well.
What about a theater? Like
Yes.
drama?
Yeah, good question, and that's been a burning question. One that wasn't overlooked by our facility advisory committee. We had a lot of conversation about it. Theaters take a lot of square feet. There's a lot of technical equipment that goes into that as well. And so it was, do we include fourth, fifth, and sixth grade of Washington, or do we have a theater? And so we prioritized those classrooms in place of putting a theater into that school. It'd be about $5 million an estimate. And so if you remember back a couple years ago, we were proposing a new school, and the cost was about 65 or 70 million. That was a full-scale gymnasium. That was a theater included with that. And so we have not included the theater. We didn't include the district office. We tried to get that $46 million number as down as we absolutely could. We also have a debt limit, and our debt limit is $48 million. We cannot bond over $48 million. So the only way for us to be able to include a theater with this project would be a donation or a sponsorship. So what we are doing, a couple things, is the Highliner Activity Center. Is there a place that we can use in the Highliner Activity Center? Can we use the cafeteria? Can we keep the 1948 theater? Those are questions that we're going to need to have help with our experts, but we don't want to spend dollars to study those until we know what happens on June 10th. And so once we get to that place, we'll put those dollars in. We are not going to forget about theater. We have a great drama program. We have 3 productions over the course of the year, but we just did not prioritize that from a cost standpoint of putting that in. The other thing that we are doing is trying to figure out partnerships. Josh, we talked about earlier, is those outdoor recreational spaces. We know that we're going to have to find some outdoor recreational spaces as well for athletics, but we also know we have to do some of those things for fine arts as well. So we have talked to BCSU about maybe temporarily until we can get something permanently using Bankstead Auditorium. We know there's distances, but there's also distances for varsity sports with the Highliner Activity Center. So maybe we can do some busing or creative things to make sure that theater and drama will continue. In fact, just an announcement to that, the school board at the last meeting approved our school district submitting an application to North Dakota High School Activity Association to be able to compete in one-act play this next year. And so that's an application that we put in. Just, I think it shows the commitment from our school board in just embracing the fine arts and doing more to celebrate the students that really succeed and excel in our fine arts programs. There was another hand over here. Question?
I'm concerned about the safety of kids getting to school before they get to that front door. I live on Central, and I have heard or seen several accidents involving kids on the corner where Dairy Queen is. And I don't know if this is a question for the city, if you talk to the city, but I think to get kids from home to the school is our first point of safety, is to get them there. Because there are a lot of bikers, a lot of walkers, and there is way too much traffic now that's not controlled really well with just simple stop signs. So I don't know who to address with that.
I can tell you that the city has submitted a grant application with DOT, and that they received some funding for the year 2026 to be able to add some crosswalks on Central Avenue. That issue is real for us, we know that. I think prior to the cafeteria building being built in '91, for those of you that are alumni of Valley City High School, the cafeteria used to be over across from the district office, and it wasn't until somebody got hit crossing that road that they built the '91 cafeteria. And so we're going to need to be very conscientious and aware of that, and I think Kyle can probably speak to the safety considerations that have been made in designing and putting together this school.
So just to touch on this quickly, and we haven't hired a civil engineer yet, but that would be the purpose of going through and understanding the traffic and understanding the access. And so what's really great about this is that we're actually trying to create multiple drop-off spaces so that high school students could park here, you could have staff drop-off, and you could have student drop-off here, you could have bus drop-off here. So we're trying to get as many different access points to pull people away from this corner, and at the same point understanding that this space would have to be evaluated by a civil engineer, and we don't want to pay for that. We don't want to ask the district to pay for that until we know that this is the right project. But 100% we're pulling kids from parents, buses, kids from there, down here. So all of that traffic, we do understand that some would come up from the east, but we would like to pull as much of the traffic from this corner as possible, and then understanding that the crosswalks would be a heavy priority. So we would absolutely address that. There's no way that this would just look identical once this is built.
Out there on the land, where you're talking about the school at, how strong is the infrastructure? Is it strong enough for the sewage and water? Is it already strong enough to add that to that location?
We did have some just very preliminary discussions on infrastructure as we were looking at different sites, really on this land and in other places. And there is a good amount of infrastructure here. Regardless, we'll have to do some sort of work. But again, I think we've notified the city, we've talked to them about that, but that's something where we would have to hire an engineer to come and figure that out. I can say that in all the projects that we work with, the vast majority of them are infill or within the town, and we always have ways to work through it. And when the town was built and the mechanical systems and the sewage systems were all set up, everything was set up, we'll have access. Just like the electrical conduit, all the different high-speed internet, all those different things are laid out, and we have no concern with that. I'm good with that.
I think those of you that are from Valley City and know, the ground is well suited for construction. Up in and around Jefferson, when we built the track, I think we were really surprised at the soils and again how stable. That is a little bit different than when we get down closer to the river and deal with some more of those issues. Question?
How are you going to address the 3rd through 6th grade students? Two things. Where are they going to have their recess time? Secondly, how are you going to address safety between those elementary kids and the junior high school? I've been in a different community. I grew up in a different community, and they put in locked doors to keep the elementary kids and the high school kids apart. Yes, I realize it's good to have the high school kids helping with the elementary kids, but you guys also know there's safety concerns as well. So what are you going to do to address that, keep the kids apart a little bit?
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in on that one? Yeah, so the discussion was on elementary kids mixing with high school and even middle school kids, and that's a big concern. I would say that across the state and region, really nationally, the trend for, I would say, medium-sized to smaller-sized school districts has been to integrate their campuses and creating K-12. One of the campuses that we worked with Grafton is a similar case where they brought everything together. If you were to go and maybe if you guys have been to Northwood recently or Nedrose, or there's different schools that we've worked with where we try to have the classroom pods, and the way to look at it here is that you've got classroom pods for the younger kids, and then for the high school in that stacked area over here and above. The goal is that your common area spaces are your spaces where staff are going to be present most of the time, and that it won't be the case where, for example, a kindergartner isn't going to walk to the cafeteria without their classroom coming with them. But at the same point, it's hard to just say it'll be fine, because the truth is that as you go in these, I would say these K-12 schools, the older kids tend to be more better behaved because they're around littler kids, because the community is smaller. Would this work in Fargo? Probably not. But would it work in smaller communities like Valley City? 100%. Generally, because if someone is inappropriate with someone of a different age, chances are your degrees of separation are probably 1, in the community of Valley City. And so we've seen a lot of collaboration with high school students and the younger kids. It hasn't been an issue. If anything, it's been kind of a welcome thing where the high school students actually tend to act a little bit better because the younger kids are around. Throughout our projects that are K-12, we don't see gates put up for students. We do see gates put up, for example, if folks were trying to get, let's say that this was the gym, and we would maybe see a gate so that the community could get into the gym and not go into all the classrooms. But what we generally never see are the kids separated. And the other thing that I would add too is that you've got your administrative spaces here, so you're not going to have a parent generally probably coming for a kindergartner here and then having a kindergartner try to work their way all the way through here. We're still going to have secure entry so that you're still going to have access points to get to your kids a little bit faster. And then you also see that the younger kids will be located closer to Jefferson, on purpose again.
Kyle, I'll just add to it as well. So I was a middle school principal in Devils Lake. We had grades 5 through 8 in one building. We painted the hallways, and so the 8th graders couldn't go into the blue hallway, and the 7th graders couldn't go into the green hallway. So that was just a simple way to make sure that everybody stayed in their own area. My school experience in Devils Lake, I went to 3 separate schools, an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. My first superintendent position was Oaks, and that was a K-12 school. What I tell you is I'm super excited about the potential of the older students being able to mentor, to read to the younger students and not having to jump in the car, waste half of their class period to drive up to Jefferson Elementary to read. We have a lot of high school students right now that are interested in education, that head up to Jefferson, go to Washington. And so I think the opportunities are really exciting for this community, and again, kind of talking about right size, and I think that's why a Grafton or a Central Cass or Northern Cass are kind of embracing that. As far as the playground part of it, the playground, we've added a playground up there with artificial turf, some play equipment, but I'll tell you there's a tremendous play area as well for football on Hannah Field. And so there's going to be a lot of green space and area for kids to be able to run and get exercise up in this area.
So Josh, the parking lot that exists today, that's the Hannah Field parking lot, that would become primarily student and teacher parking? Is that what the intent is?
Yeah, I'm just checking around to see if any students are in here, and just depending on what we say in response. But I say that jokingly. We've thrown a couple things out, and so part of ICON's programming is they figure out the number of parking spaces relative to student enrollment on the number of drivers and staff members. And so we believe that between Jefferson and the 3 through 12 staff and juniors and seniors, there would be enough parking spaces in the new parking lots. That would mean freshmen and sophomore drivers are going to get relegated on a seniority system down to Hannah Field. And so that would be the overflow. But a heck of a lot better than parking in the neighborhoods. What we wouldn't want to have happen, and I talked to Gwen Crawford about this, and this is one of her concerns, is we do not want students heading up into Valley View and parking up into those neighborhoods. So if we can commit to that today, to say we are going to tell students that they can't go up into that neighborhood and park in that, and that they have ample parking in a parking lot the district owns, and so we have better control over students driving in the parking lot and being responsible, but we also have quite a bit of parking on the north and the east side of the school.
So how will that affect pickup time for kids? I have picked up grandkids from Cheney Middle School in Fargo. And in order to pick your kids up and avoid the combustion, people park in the neighborhoods. It's a zoo. It's crazy. Would that affect like people parking up in Valley View to have their kids come over there so they're not in the mess in the other parking areas?
I think that's a really great question, because what I heard you say is, it's not the kids we're worried about, it's the adults. It's adult behavior, and that's hard. We deal with that right now on Central Avenue. We tell our parents to park in Hannah Field, and where do they park? They park on the other side of Central Avenue. And so it's convenience, they don't want to get bottled up in there as well.
They don't want to get into that mess, because I picked her up, and I've been told by her parents, with my son, don't park, don't go into the circle to get your kid. Park over here in this residential area.
What I can tell you is we've made drastic improvements to Jefferson Elementary in the last 5 or 6 years with pickup and drop-off with the parking lot. And so that would be our same commitment, would be a staggered probably dismissal to make sure that elementary students are getting out at a different time than our 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, to make sure that we're not crossing over that. Kyle, I don't know if you've had experience or can maybe say anything otherwise.
It's just all about staggering time, and maybe even if we're staggering junior high even in high school, those are all decisions and logistic things that the school would have to work through. But again, there's bus pickup, there's parent pickup. We haven't had a civil engineer design this yet, so if it's off, it's probably because of me. But we are going to work through that.
Other questions?
Is there any other sources of funding other than the bond?
So the question was, are there other sources of funding? So we pursued state dollars. We had 2 bills that a coalition that we created helped to write and to sponsor. We thought kind of optimistically that the state would be interested in putting dollars towards schools of our size or smaller. That hit a dead end. I'll tell you, we're going to continue to pursue that avenue because there's a huge inequity of schools of our size in West Fargo and Fargo. They continue to build new and new. You see new schools popping all the time. Now, granted, they have population and they disperse that tax impact across, but what about rural North Dakota? And I consider Valley City to be rural in that as well. So we're not done with that. And then the second part of it is federal dollars, and so we have the COPA dollars. We use some of those COPA dollars already for our existing infrastructure. We talked about the HVAC systems that we've addressed, but right now those dollars have been used for transportation, buses, and so they're in our general fund right now. So the short answer to that is no, as far as state or federal dollars. We have talked about, is there sponsorship and donation dollars that we could pursue that would decrease that tax impact? And that's a conversation that we're having in the district right now. Is there individuals that are blessed with resources to be able to contribute that would potentially decrease the burden for everybody else? And so that's a conversation we're having and just wanting to figure out what the right time is to pursue some of those conversations.
When you sell Washington and the district office, that $46 million figure, has that already been incorporated? Because obviously that's money coming into the school district.
No, it's not. And so that's a great question. So if we sell Washington and we sell the district office, can those dollars be used to decrease the overall cost? And yes, those dollars, and so we've got some real estate and got some realtors and give some estimates on those buildings of what the value would be. And so we would take that into consideration and account and hopefully decrease the cost. And so those are simply based on what an estimate would be if we sold the district building as well as Washington Elementary. What I can tell you that the demolition of the 1919, 48, 58, and portions of 71 is included in the $46 million.
Also building a new parking lot.
Also building a new parking lot. And dollars for the remodel and for the new entrances, because you'd have to do something when you added on those 91. You didn't consider that being an exterior wall, so there's going to have to be some renovations there and go into that as well. Question?
Yeah, the old part of the school here that's going to be demolished, and is that going to be a parking lot, so they have more parking spaces for activities that they have here?
So where we're standing right now is 1919. Off to the east would be the 1958. Off to the west is the 1948. and then south of us is the 1971. So the intent would be to demolish the 1919, the 48, the 58, and part of 71, and then that would turn into a parking area accessing the Highlander Activity Center.
I just want to make a comment. The gentleman asked about the potential of other funds. I think we need to keep in mind the work that you and several other school districts did this past year promoting that concept. There are several other school districts in a similar situation as I was saying. And I think what I hear from talking to friends in Bismarck, this was a topic of conversation. And Bismarck, things don't happen overnight, but there's a recognition that something has to happen because of the number of schools involved. So I think the time, your leadership, and others was a tremendous investment, and I got to be optimistic that at some point, sooner than later, we're going to see some relief from the state to address, what is it, 12 or 14 schools that we know of?
We have schools across the state of North Dakota, Cavalier, Oaks, Belfield, North Dakota, that their schools, the foundation we talk about, ours being in good shape, their schools are literally crumbling to the ground, and they don't have the population or the tax dollars to be able to address those. And so we came forth and proposed to the state. We presented 4 times to a legislative intern committee, trying to highlight these challenges that we're in, and understanding that if we ask our taxpayers, there's a significant tax impact to be able to fund a school. And so some of the feedback is frustrating, because there's a lot of representatives that represent Fargo and Bismarck and Minot, and so sometimes it's hard for those individuals to get outside of those areas and to see the challenges, and that was one of our primary purposes, was to highlight and address these very real challenges. Our kids shouldn't be treated any different than those that are in a bigger community, a larger size community.
I would encourage you, and I know you're swamped with a lot of things going on, but continue that effort over the interim. Because I do think there's a chance, sooner rather than later, for the state to step to the plate on a portion.
Other questions? We haven't hit the 4-hour mark yet, so there's still plenty of opportunity to ask questions. You all came. If you had a burning question, you can ask now. Otherwise, as well, feel free to stick around. We have school board members here. We have facility advisory committee members here that I know would be happy to have a conversation, answer questions. Sheila Larson over the corner, she loves answering questions and talk about that experience, talk about her classroom and what it's like as a teacher. Joelle Manlove as well. But then Kyle and Travis, Josh here as well. And so any other questions, maybe going once, going twice. Question, sir.
Part of the elderly population here. We probably have what I consider a $100,000 home being assessed at $300,000, and I'm going to get a $1,000 increase in my taxes that is going to nearly shove us out of our home.
The question was for seniors, fixed incomes, and the challenge of valuations, and we've seen valuations across Valley City, across the county, skyrocket with everything else over the years. And so this tax impact is real. We are not sugarcoating it, folks. One iota, one bit. The committee has not, the school board has not. A couple of years ago, we were looking at 50, 60, $70 million school. We said no, absolutely not. Whether we had the means or not, there was no way it was going to happen from a tax impact standpoint. The scary part for us is, if not a replacement of this and we go back to a repair, there's still a cost, as we presented and shared with you, to fix the systems right now that have exceeded their useful life and need to be replaced. We're in a portion of the building where there's no ventilation. There's no fresh air that's circulating through. The HVAC, the boiler systems come from down near the hack that were added in the 70s. and they function to the best that Jordan's ability is to make them work over the course of a winter when he fires them in October and he shuts them down in about April. And so that's a daily challenge and a daily grind. We have classrooms that range from 60 degrees to 90 degrees just based on the aging systems. And so please do know I respect the opinion. And so we do want to educate. We don't want to tell how individuals should spend the property tax relief. But we hope that again, if this would go through, would decrease some of that tax impact and that burden.
I just want to thank you guys for being here and presenting tonight. And on a humorous note, I'm glad to be pointed out that the time I spent in Washington School's hallway was actually educational. I was learning something. I wasn't just out there for the reason I was maybe out there. But thank you all for doing that.
Okay, question? Yes, 2 more questions.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. These are our children, they're the future. And I think sometimes we need to think outside of ourselves. And I know that's hard, I'm on a fixed income. But I think we need to see to the future. These are our children, they are the future. And we're crumbling and falling apart.
Well, and I look at
this facility.
your comment about the handicap accessibility. We could end up getting many fines or even lawsuits if we do not meet those needs. And I'm surprised we haven't already. I worked with special needs students for almost 30 years, and it's difficult to move around in our schools.
Thank you guys all. Thanks so much for coming. Again, we're going to hang around, so if you have questions, but if you have feedback, if you want to share your thoughts, your point of view, where you're coming from, please don't hesitate. Board members, if you don't mind, Phil Hatcher, Sherry Horshauger, Darren Anderson, Ryan Mathias are here, and so they're happy. Ryan, if you want to come over here, maybe an opportunity to speak to them. There's some facility committee members. How many would like to go on a tour of the building? We're going to have you individuals, if you're willing to go on a tour. Jordan Heck is a great person to provide that tour. And so Jordan's going to be over here. Travis and Aaron are ready to join as well. So as soon as